Hi, good evening. My name is Ashley and I work with the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight and want to thank you so much for joining us for this post-film panel that I feel really honored to be a part of tonight. We have three panelists that will be joining us and I'm so happy to introduce you to them. Our three panelists are Kumu Pomaika'i Gaui, who is the owner and lead instructor at Kehaulani Hula Studio, which he started in 1988, a space that engages dancers of different ages and experiences in ancient and modern hula. We also have joining us Aaran Afalava, who's an instructor and choreographer for Feagaiga. Born in Torrance, California, Aaran resides in Salt Lake City, working in education while also working with OCA, Utah Asian Pacific American Advocates, and the Utah Pacific Islander Civic Engagement Coalition. And our third panelist is Lanakila Bush, who is a multidisciplinary cultural practitioner from Kailua, Oahu, and who has worked as a professional dancer and learned dance styles from multiple Polynesian cultures. He also works as a visual artist in a variety of media. So thank you all so much for joining us for this panel, this discussion. And the first question I would like to ask is, what was your reaction to the film and how does it relate or reflect your personal experiences with dance?
I can start us off. I mean, how could we not relate to any of that? I mean, that film completely resonated with everything that was about our people. And although I come from a Samoan background, we still share the same Pasifika characteristics when it comes to dance, when it comes to using dance to tell stories, to also pass down history, genealogy. Our dances, our language, our songs are what connects us to our past and to our ancestors. And so seeing this film, I couldn't help but get emotional, just because I think my emotions stemmed from that connection between the arts or dance and our culture. The funny thing is, when it comes to Pasifika cultures, things such as dance, we don't really see it as like arts. It's kind of just like, it's just who we are. It's a part of who we are, what we do. It's our norm. And so that's where a lot of my emotions stemmed from. And then a lot of my emotions also stemmed from knowing the history of the Hawaiian kingdom and the Hawaiian people, and just knowing how much of their culture was watered down because of colonization, because of the United States, and the rough history that the Hawaiian people had. A lot of my emotions stemmed from that as well. So yeah, but again, it was such an empowering film. There was a lot of passion that I got out of it. There's a lot of inspiration that I gained too from watching it. So I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Aaran. Would someone else like to share, the connection, any reaction you had, or a certain connection you felt to the film?
I could go next.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. And this film actually connected to me in a really personal way. I'd never heard of the film and I'd never seen it before, but Uncle Robert Casimiro, he's actually one of my mom's hula brothers. So he shares the same hula lineage with my mom. Me personally, I'm not a halau dancer. I've danced professionally, but I've never danced in halau. But I would say that the halau experience or environment has affected me kind of like in a secondhand way, in that, so Uncle Robert mentioned in the film that his kumu or his teacher was Auntie Mikey Ayu. Auntie Mikey Ayu was my mom's first kumu hula. And when Uncle Robert Uniki as an Olapa, from an Olapa to a Kumu hula, or when he kind of graduated or passed from being a student to being a teacher, my mom actually danced at the Uniki. And one of his classmates in that Uniki was Auntie Lena Alahaini, who ended up being my mom's Kumu for pretty much the rest of her life. And my mom and her sister, they grew up dancing with Auntie Lena Alahaini and Nā Kamalei Olikolehua, and that's the name of the halau. And hula is a really big part of their life, so much that they planted all of these different plants in our yard that are sacred to hula, like ohi olehua. They had tea leaves, red and green. They had lauae. They had like 5 different types of plumeria. They had palapalai. They had all of these plants to use in hula that are sacred to hula. And this is also that they wouldn't have to go up into the mountains and gather these themselves. We had them growing right in our yard. And so I grew up tending to all of these plants. I grew up using these plants, making lei, and I also went to Kamehameha. So the film, at the beginning of the film, when all those kids are walking by, those are actually my classmates. So it was cool to see some of that. And it was actually a really good film to watch, and it brings up a lot of really good talking points and things that we can think about as individuals and as a people as well. So that was my overall take on it.
Well, thank you for that. That's amazing that you have such a specific and direct connection to the people in the film. It's wonderful to hear about that. Thank you.
Lanakila, I think that's Pomaika'i, that there was a garden to go to, because if you have to go on those trails and pick those things to make those leis, I mean, it's more special, but if you could just go to the backyard and get that lauae, get that palapalai or ohe olehua and make those leis. For me, it's also a personal connection. My Kumu hula palani kahala has come from Robert Casimiro and Nā Kamalei as well. And I've danced with Palani for about 14, 15 years until his passing. And Mary Monica was a part of our life at some point in time. And so the time that you take into prepping yourself to get onto that stage, making the leis, your costumes, the practice hours that are put in to get to the Mary Monica stage is immense. We lose a lot of family time. We lose vacation time, because that's where it goes, to Mary Monica. And every year we plan around Mary Monica as far as our personal life. So hula becomes intertwined so much so that it becomes just life. Whether it's hula, whether it's picking our greenery, making our costumes, it's part of everyday living. So the film for me touched a lot of places that I've been, seeing people that I've danced with as myself. Lanakila, I probably know your mom. So for me, it brought back a lot of joy, a lot of sorrow too, because we miss it as we get older. Now that I'm up there, it's kind of hard to do some of those things, but it's always nice to get on the stage and perform, because no matter if you have gout, arthritis, when you hear that music or you hear that ipu, things just go away and you just get in tune to what's happening then and there. So I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing your perspective. I love hearing from you all, and I know that certainly the audience that's attending right now too likely does just as much. And I want to invite those of you who are tuning in right now to submit questions in the chat that you might like to ask. We'd love to present those and get some feedback. So please do put those in there. We'd love to talk about what is interesting to you all as well. I have another question I would like to pose. I'd like to talk just a little bit about the aspect of gender when it comes to men dancing in these traditions. And within this film, it kind of shows ways that maybe these dancers are challenging stereotypes or kind of pushing back against certain ideas around masculinity. And I wonder if any of you would be willing to share your thoughts about that aspect of gender when it comes to your practices.
You know, in hula, it's hard to find men that want to dance hula, no matter what the stigma may be. Yeah, so when I danced, you know, you automatically was mahu, or on the softer side. And we, you know, men don't come dime a dozen, but as soon as they're faced with being stereotyped as mahu or, you know, soft, they don't want to do the hula. So I think it takes a lot of, you know, mental just to get over it. For me, it's everybody was their individual, no matter what they did after hula, before hula. That wasn't a part of who they were when we were together. So it's hard to see people kind of automatically do that because, you know, for myself as well, automatically, because I teach hula, I must be soft or I'm mahu. And, you know, after a while, I just said, you know what, whatever. So if people say, you must be mahu, sure. I'm not gonna spend my time to change somebody's preference or not preference. I mean, their attitude towards me, because if that's how they are, then that's how they are with other people as well. If I can educate them and help them maybe see another side of it, then fine. But if they're just going to argue with me, I have no time to sit there and discuss my teachings with them.
Thank you. Lanakila, do you? Yeah.
I was just thinking about that. It's actually super interesting to think about that, because from what I understand and what I've been taught is that back in the day, like ikawaka hiko, so like back in the long times ago days, I was taught that hula was kapu for, and it was only for men, and women dancing hula wasn't until way later. So the idea that hula or dancing in general is something that's feminine or that's attributed to women, that's an idea that doesn't really belong to us. It's an idea that was imposed on us, and Uncle Robert said in the film, it's something that we bought into. And then we kind of injected that into our culture and we accepted that as the truth. So like, if anything, Uncle Robert, back in his time, he was kind of just reminding us of how things really are, how things really should be, or another way that we can look at things. Like for example, what Uncle Robert was doing as far as like the Hawaiian Renaissance, it was happening in all different parts of the culture. It was happening on the va'a, or like on the voyaging canoes. It was happening in the land itself. They're organizing the Department of Hawaiian Homelands or the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. That's when you think of times like Haunani Trask or Nainoa Thompson, really big names in the Hawaiian Renaissance. This was all happening at the same time, and they were doing the same thing, where they were just reminding us of what things really are and what things really aren't. And I think one of the big things with Uncle Robert was that hula is for men. It's for women and it's also for men. And they even mentioned in the film that his halau is a little more, I've heard it said that they're a little more on the effeminate side. They move their hands in a certain way. They move their hips in a certain way. That's attributed to women. Like I said, that idea doesn't come from us. It doesn't belong to us. But Uncle Robert was even explaining that, like, yeah, sure, men can do the whole hi-ha, ku, real strong, rigid stuff, but men can also dance like this.
Yeah, and it's funny that Lanakila shared that, because that's the word that kept popping up in my mind, was that it's just reminding all these things were already established, but folks like Uncle Robert were reminding our people of ways that our people practiced dance before. And so for this question, especially, it's one that I love too. It's a stereotype that I love breaking too, especially when it comes to Samoan dancing. There is that stigma behind men dancing a certain way, men kneeling in a certain way or moving their hands in a certain way. And the funny thing is, my dance group right now, Feagaiga, is actually an all-female group, and I'm the choreographer for them. And so, just it's about breaking those stereotypes, but then also, like Hila said, trying to remind our people of the traditions that our people had established long ago, and then also kind of breaking out of these norms that we have now that weren't established, that weren't ours. These ideas didn't come from our people. Obviously, with colonization and the United States influence, um, it affected a lot, and then especially when it came to gender roles as well. And that's interesting about gender roles as well. When the westernized thinking, they established these gender roles, and when they came to our islands, that's kind of what they introduced to our people. However, our people were always well in touch. Our men were always well in touch with their feminine side. Our women were always in touch with their masculine side, and that was just the normal thing. And so that translated into our dances, translated into different responsibilities in our villages and our families. So it was interesting to see that part of the film highlighted, and I'm happy it was, because that's an element of colonization that affected our culture and for generations, as you've seen. So yeah.
Thank you all for talking a little bit and shedding some light on that aspect of the film. And it strikes me that, you know, this film was made about 15 years ago. So I wonder if you all have any thoughts about if or how things have changed within within the dances that your practices. Like, has it changed in 15 years? Have things evolved in certain ways, or I'd be curious to know about that.
I would say that things have changed and things have evolved a little bit, but there's still a long way to go. Like evidence of that, when I was in high school, this is at Kamalei, we were playing this when I was playing football, we would have our huddle at the end of practice, and coach would give us notes and all that. And sometimes he would ask like, "Oh, where's so and so? I didn't see him at practice." Then someone would just yell out, "Oh, he's dancing right now." And that was the end of it. It wasn't ever, "Oh, he's dancing," or nobody ever. There were no jokes said. There was nothing. There's nothing to add to that because he's dancing. That's what he's doing, and it seemed more normal at the time than it was when, say, Uncle Robert first started Nā Kamalei.
um I agree. I think there's still a long way that our people need to come when it comes to our dances. But I too have seen some I guess some restoration of old dances, old moves, coming back, which is great. You know, it's funny that it's always labeled as old school, or even traditional, but it is nice to see some old ways um, kind of remanifesting itself in our dances and in our culture, because when it comes to our Pasifika cultures, if these certain changes happen in dance and even in songs, then it affects generations. It affects the entire culture, and so it's nice to see these small changes happen with dance as well.
think what's nice is we have legacy halau now, that we have these traditions being passed on, that these students are actually going through the umiki process, and taking on their knowledge from their kumu and instilling them into their students. And that we see with a lot of them nowadays, especially this past Mary Mark, there were a lot of brand new kumu hula that were there on stage presenting dance. You know, if you watch Mary Monarch, or if you know the hula lineage, you know where these people come from, just by the hand movements that they do, by the oli that they do, the style of oli that they do. And at one point in time, we've lost that, where we couldn't tell where different people were coming from as far as their line of hula. With the making of videos and such, it was easy for people to learn hula outside of the halau element or halau setting. And we've seen that for a couple of years. But recently, that's been changing with the younger people coming up and taking that time to go through the training. And I think this is where it gets lost as far as legacy hula or just the protocol that comes with hula, is that people don't take the time to invest the years that it takes to develop the knowledge that comes with the hula. Because without the stories behind these dances, they're simply movements. And if we don't understand the winds, we don't understand the currents, we don't understand the rustling of the leaves and what type of leaves they are, we lose that part of the spiritual element of hula. And so for myself, it's nice to see that it's coming back. For myself, even to be on the continent, I think taking that time to really share what hula is and not what it may be perceived to be. It's not Waikiki, it's not the 40s and 50s where everything is hula awana. So teaching all of this is passing on my traditions as well to the people on the continent, or where I live in Utah, or now with Zoom, it could be anywhere. But that knowledge of legacy that we pass down, that we make sure these people are keepers of our culture. They may not be Hawaiian, they may be of other ethnicity, but if they're taking that time to invest, how do we invest in them? Yeah, by teaching them and be pono. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your rich responses to that question. And we have actually a question from the chat that I think kind of dovetails a little bit with this part of our conversation. Hulalani asks, how do you continue to perpetuate and practice your culture being in Utah?
Zoom has helped a lot with the going indoors and canceling in-person classes. So being able to be creative on Zoom helps you to be in tune with the class. I mean, that's the only way you can engage them. And sometimes I even find myself really having to be engaging, because it does take a lot. It is trying to make sure that everybody's on the right page. I must say though, some of my students with Oli has taken it to the next level, because we're here for some odd reason. When I was in person, it was hard to teach them one Oli, you know, for the whole year, but they've gotten better. Dances have been easier to teach because, you know, I can mirror dance in front of them, so it was easier to jump on Zoom. Teaching them how to utilize Zoom, that's another story. It took us about a month before we got rid of the eyeballs, before we got rid of the armpit in the screen, the kupuna, or our elders especially, you know, can you hear me? Yes, we can. And making sure that they're going in the right direction. So it was fun. Now we can break into breakout rooms, or we can do surveys. So some of our kupuna are in their 80s. Some of us young guys are still trying to figure out some of the things. So we learn from the kupuna as well, and it's awesome to watch them use the new technologies. especially having, when they say, you know, I never dream of this day. And meaning that they're on screen watching you and learning something, and they could be in Hawaii, they could be in Tennessee, they could be in Oregon. It's just amazing what the opportunities have opened up from this pandemic alone.
I would love to answer this too.
Yeah.
Because I agree with Kumu. Zoom and technology has helped a lot. The way I've looked at dance, I've always seen Siva Samoa as a bridge, right, to my culture, a bridge to the motherland, the islands. And then with that being said, I also feel like our language, our native tongue, is also a bridge to our people and our culture as well. And so I think just being here in the States, regardless of where you are, continuously practicing your language, continuously practicing dance is how we can all, no matter where we are, hold on to our culture, hold on and remember our ancestors, and perpetuate, whether it be Samoa or the Hawaiian culture, anywhere over the Pacific. I think those two elements play a big role in us remembering who we are.
I was kind of trying to think of an answer. This is actually a really good question. It's like the $1 million question, really. Like, how do we keep practicing and how do we keep perpetuating while not living on the Aina, or while not living like in Hawaii? And it's hard. It's tricky, but it's possible. That's not to say that I'm an expert at it or anything, but it brings to mind a proverb. Since everyone was talking about language, the proverb is "Imaika'i ke kalu i ka oha." So the proverb basically, so that we're all on the same page, it talks about the taro plant, and how you can tell the qualities of the root, the taro root, by the shoots that come out of it. And my point in sharing that is that while we're living here, away from Hawaii, away from Samoa, away from wherever we're from, it's important to establish a connection with some kind of root or some kind of kumu, something that can teach you, something that you can learn from, and something that will keep you in check if that ever has to happen. Because if we want to compare ourselves to rivers, every river can get bigger and smaller, but at the end of the day, the river needs a border. And if the river doesn't have a border, then it overflows and it causes problems. So I would say that the thing that's helped me is to find a source, a root, a kumu, someone that can help you, teach you, help you learn, keep you in check, and kind of like what Aaron was saying, is to use whatever you choose, if it's dance, if it's making food, if it's your language, whatever, use that as a lens to other things, because otherwise we'd just be doing motions, or we'd just be tying knots, or we'd just be saying words. Do everything with a purpose and have something to ground you, some outside source.
Thank you all for spending time with that question. I love the way that your answers connect, but also have these very different perspectives. There's 2 more questions, so I know we might not have a lot of time left, but I'd love to ask. We have a question, and forgive in advance my pronunciation, I am sure. What's the process of graduating from Hamana to Kumu Hula or Ho'opa?
The last word was? Oh, okay. Ho'opa. Okay. everyone's a little different as far as the process on how the knowledge is exposed to the student. You know, we have students that come to us in classes, whether it's an hour, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, once a week, 4 times a month. Some students, that's all I see of them. When I was taking hula, you know, if I wasn't at home, I probably was at Kumu's house. If I wasn't at Kumu's house or at home, we were at practice. If we weren't at practice, we were up in the mountains picking things. So when you learn hula, it's a little different nowadays because of that disconnect with students on that personal level. So going through the process of for my schooling as well, or anyways, is that we come in on a level where the metaphor I would use is stones. Yeah, we set this foundation to build a house. So when the students come to hula, they start learning on how to build the house. So they become these foundations. And upon this foundation, we build the second tier, which would be the physical embodiment. So if we look at a tower, so that next level is the olapa, or the dancing. And this level, you learn all the physical movements of the group. Yeah, some might have a signature move that they do, but all these things are learned, all the different dances. And then you take different tests, whether it's oral test or a written test, and then you have to do a physical test of maybe, you know, of your repertoire of ancient hula and modern hula. You have to do 95% of them or 100% of them, be able to perform them if Kumu calls it out. So you're not sure what he's going to test you on. So you're responsible for dances that you learned from the time that you entered the school up until your testing. If you pass and everything's okay, then you move to the next level, which is ho'opa'a. And the ho'opa'a now becomes the memorizer of things, all the different oli. Yeah, he memorizes the mele to the oli. He memorizes the words to different hula. The protocol is something else that he starts to learn. What chants do you do when you enter the forest? What chants do you do when you leave the forest? So once that's accomplished, again, a series of tests are done. And then the next level is to become Kumu hula. Now you're expected to know the ins and outs of the school, all the hula, all the oli, all the protocol. And we have to remember protocol, when I use that word, it's what you do in your house. Yeah, someone else may have a different protocol for certain things, and that's in their house. So there's no wrong answer to what your protocol is. As long as you can say, this is what we do in our house, and this is what we will continue to do for youngs. Each level is also given a particular color based on the individual. So on that first level, everybody comes in as the color gray, and we start to build this canvas of color. Once they learn the physical movements and become an olapa, they take on a color. For us is the aura of that individual. So for myself, I'm green. So I took on a light color of green. I also presented with the lei, which was the palapalai, and that was mine. And as I moved up to different levels, I got a darker shade of that particular green. And so as we continue up, we utilize the rainbow as a means of the colors that we use in our group. So if we mixed all those colors together, we came out with black. So if we look at the circle of life, we start in the darkness. Yeah, we're born, we go through our life. Once we return, we go back to darkness. So as Kumu hula, we take on that color black as well. But the learning is still endless and boundless, just like the darkness of the skies. We're still learning as Kumu Hula. So I'm not afraid to say, I need to go check my sources if I don't know the question to an answer or an answer to a question. And I'm not afraid of saying that to a student because I'm still learning as well. So that's the process that we go through. And it takes years to do that process. So it's not like you jump in and say, hey, 1 year I got my certificate of Kumu Hula-ship or anything. It doesn't work that way. Everything is based on the relationship between Hamana and Kumu Hula. So it's that journey that we take that also helps build us as better po'e hula as we continue our journey. So sorry, that was kind of long-winded.
No, thank you so much for that explanation and shedding some light on that part of well, just the process in general. If you all have time for one more question, I think this is a great one to kind of end on. And we have someone asking, is there anything the film does not convey that you would add?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not, yeah, I don't know. And yes, no, I'm not fully in the hula space as well, and so I'm not too familiar with all its processes and everything. So that I'm so grateful to learn from Kila and Kumu today. But I didn't see anything that was missing, if you will. I think it touched pretty well on everything, from there being certain dances and songs that were written for men to the stereotypes behind men dancing in general. I think it touched on everything pretty well. So I don't think I feel that qualified to answer this, just because of the film is around Hawaiian culture and hula, and so. But I think it did a great job and didn't leave much out. So
I'm not sure if it did show or if it did. The commitment that individuals make to hula. You know, we're a family. We have families that we raise. We have jobs, and sometimes it becomes a hardship. And I know for myself, a couple of times, as my kids were coming, when my kids were growing up, that I've actually taken, you know, a lot of time where hula was everything. So birthdays, you know, start of school, or I missed a lot of those. So the family sacrifice that I took for granted, we don't show, because if we have spouses, it takes a lot for the spouse to allow us to go out and do hula. And it's fundraising, yeah. So you're out doing fundraising, rather it's shows or serving at luau's and doing whatever it takes to raise monies to get to Mary Monarch. So we've seen all the pretty stuff, but there's a lot of ugly stuff, or you know, not so pretty stuff that goes on in the background. You know, there's injuries to consider. There's you know, maybe your costumes wasn't ready. I've been to Mary Monarchs where the seamstress is in the dressing room sewing the dresses before the ladies go out on stage, or leis were missing from a halau. So after we get off stage, we're taking off our stuff and tying on the leis onto them so they can go out on stage and perform. So there's a lot of commitment, and at all different levels. But I think showing the families that also help that individual dancer get to that stage is something that we don't see. And sometimes that's a lot of stress on the dance floor, and for the families. So yeah.
I have one thing. I don't know if I wouldn't say that it was missing from the film, more so just as watching the film. After watching the film, my mind kind of went on a trip. And I was thinking about how in all things, not just in hula, there we had our people had some Western standards imposed on us, and we kind of took ownership of it in a way, and we started to forget a lot of different things about ourselves, about our people, about our culture. And it got to a point, or it's at a point where we as a people, we accept, or we kind of magnify or glorify aspects of our ancestors that Western society would deem like acceptable. Like you'll always hear people say like, oh, we were warriors, or we were voyagers, which yes, is true, but we were also dancers. Or like our men were strong, they were brave, which is true, but they're also loving. And they were also really deeply spiritual. And I think in Christian writ, like in the Bible, I think they say that man was created in God's image. Nowadays, when we think about our ancestors, it's almost like we create them in our image, where we remember them or imagine them how we'd like them to be. We want them to be warriors. We want them to be these brave voyagers, which they were. But there's so many different things. And I think the biggest thing for me, not that it's missing from the film, but what I got from the film is to think about that and to go out of my way to learn myself and to teach my family, my ohana, like my wahine and my keiki, is that to learn the culture and learn about our kupuna, our ancestors as they were, all of it, not just how we'd like them to be or what is told to us that they should be, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that perspective as well. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I feel really privileged to be here with you all tonight, and to have some time to hear from you. So thank you, the three of you, so much for being here and spending time together this evening. I would also like to thank, before we say goodbye, I'd like to thank Russell, of course, with Utah Film Center, and Lauren with Utah Pacific Island Film Series. And of course, those of you there that we can't see, we know you're there, and we appreciate you tuning in this evening and spending time with us as well. So thank you all very much. And again, we appreciate you and hope you take good care.